Hello everybody. Evan Abrams here, back at you with another video challenge here on Adobe Live. Today, we are going to be taking a look at a kind of documentary film style type of a thing where we are going to take some kind of quote, we're going to highlight it, we're going to separate it from the original source, we're going to make it much more readable. This is really useful if you're doing documentary style stuff, if you are doing some kind of archival piece, if you are doing a kind of explainer or a news piece. This can be really useful in getting actual documents in front of people, whether you're trying to prove a point or document something or just tell it like it is. It's a great way to bring those things forward. You could be doing this to newspapers, you could be doing this with websites, press releases, you might do it with photos, but we're going to be covering more text-based things in here. And so the first step is to get a scan or a capture or a screenshot of whatever the thing is that you need to be highlighting. But first, we are going to jump into After Effects and I'll show you where we're going with all this. All right, so here is my screen. My face is nice and out of the way down here in the corner. And here's what's going on. We are going to pop on whatever the media or content is that we want to highlight. Then we're going to scroll down to the relevant section. We're going to pop that up nice and large while making the background elements kind of recede away. Then we're going to highlight the relevant sections. So we'll maybe use some highlighter effects, something like that. Then this will go back in. Everything will resume normal. Maybe we scroll down to another section and highlight some more of that if we've got time. We'll see how we get on. That's the main idea that we are bringing forward here. So pop the thing on, scroll to the relevant section, pop it up, and move on. So a lot of this is about readability, making things more legible, less legible. So that's why we would darken or blur the background here so you can tell the difference between the two. That's why we are highlighting the relevant sections. You might even want to pop on some text that says who this is from or when it was done, all those types of great stuff. But today we're going to focus just on the highlighting part. And you might be doing this with, in this case, scans of a website. So these are just screenshots that have been stitched together. I'm going to double click here on the giant stitched together screenshot here. I assembled this in Photoshop. So taking a whole bunch of screenshots, scrolling, screenshot again, scrolling, screenshot again, you can put things over top of each other and use the difference mode, blending mode, to help line things up perfectly. But you might take a scan of a newspaper, you might take a photo, you might be pulling through archival elements, scans of books. This could be someone's tweets. This could be screenshots of Twitter. The big thing, though, when you are pulling in source material for this, make sure that they are quite large. So in this case, 3,680 wide. That is quite wide, probably much wider than we're ever going to display this thing, especially if we're going to be outputting 1920 by 1080 pieces out of this. So no matter what it is, no matter what form of the thing is, make sure you have enough pixels so that if you were to zoom in on it quite a lot, it's still going to be nice and crisp and legible when we zoom in on it. You might not have a choice when it comes to archival things. So if these are scans of old Washington Post or something like that, then it's going to be what you get, but try to get the most high quality, biggest pixel size that you can out of any scans that are coming to you. Okay, let's move on and do something with this. No matter what the thing is, the first step we must do is make that element show up. So I'm going to create a new composition, and let's just go ahead and call this block quote highlight, because that's what we're doing. You'll probably name this for the specific thing that you're doing, so it makes sense in your project. But the big thing you want to do is make sure that you are creating something that is the width and height and frame rate of where this is going to be used. So if this is going to be used in a documentary piece that will be shown at 24 frames a second, it's going to be this wide by this high. Make sure you put that in. If this is for a social media thing, maybe portrait or landscape versions of that. Make sure that your settings here, they could be anything, but it's important that they are the thing that it's going to be used as, if that makes sense. Use your composition settings relevant to where it's going to go and the way it's going to be used. Okay, enough about that. Hit OK. Let's get to work. Take your source, whatever the thing is, drop it down on the timeline, and you can see right away, oh boy, that's way too big. So I might have to scale it down. I might have to move it down like this. And if we're going to cleanly scroll through this, well, we need to crop it in some way. So I'm going to just come up here to my rectangle tool, double click on that. It's going to create a rectangle that is the same size and shape as the frame here. I'm going to twirl into the rectangle, twirl into that rectangle path, and I'm just going to scroll down. I'm going to scrub this down a little bit. Now we might want something, rather than being 16 by 9 orientation, I don't know, I might just type in 800 by 600, relock those, and then make that a little bit larger again. Something like this. And I want this to be the visual area that we can see of this particular object. Let's see, it doesn't necessarily need a stroke around it, but we'll address that in a minute. The main thing that we need to do is make sure that this has a fill. I'm going to make this bright pink like that. And I will round the corners, but first I want to make sure my rounded corners line up with the rounded corners of this element. So step one, I'm going to make sure I got that layer selected, come into the track mat. If you don't see your track mat options, toggle switches and modes so you can enjoy your track mats. And we just point one to the other. And now this shape is cropping that image. Now we're going to go ahead and shrink this down. So we can shrink it like this. It can be a little bit difficult to get things shrunken and moved exactly how we want. So I'm going to drag using the anchor point pan behind tool, tap Y on your keyboard to get that. I'm just going to drag this. I'm going to drag this all the way up to the top, the first pixels up here, holding down Shift to make sure that this is just going vertically. And then I'm going to hold down Ctrl on my keyboard, Command, Control on maybe yours, and get that aligned, snapping to the top of the shape layer. Then I can scale this up with ease and just make sure that the edge is lining up with the edge here. And if you're finding it's imprecise, well, you are scrubbing this number. Again, hold down Command or Control, and you will get some finer tweaks to that. And we can come in here, and I'm going to find the roundness, rectangle roundness, and we are just going to increase that number. You see it starts to bite in, and I just want to adjust that to it just where it's taken a chomp. And there we go. We got that nice rounded corner. The joy of this is that now I can slide this element behind, and it looks like we are scrolling through a window. I want to keep the top of the panel, top of the web page at the top. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this website bar. And I'm just going to make sure that I am using my rectangle tool with that selected. And I'm just going to select with a mask just that part at the top. We can turn off the layer below in case we want to come in, double click on that path, and just pinch that up like this. So now when we have a look at both of those, we can scrub the website under the bar, and it looks a little bit more like how a website goes. The next thing that I think I would want is I want a bit of a border around this. So I'm going to say duplicate this first rectangle up here. I'm going to put it below everything. We will make it visible, and I'm just going to make sure that the fill is set to black, and the stroke, I'll just make that a little bit bigger, just a little bit, just enough that we can see, oh yes, there is sort of a stroke or a boundary on that. It doesn't have to be too big, but it'll just go ahead and make that a little bit clearer. Again, it's all about clarity, and you might even put a drop shadow on this so that it is standing out. So we'll find our effects and presets. Let's close down the rest of these things, and we want to find the drop shadow on here. So put the drop shadow and maybe give it some softness like this, and we should be good to go. Perfect. So all of this needs to pop on. So I'm going to make sure that all of these elements are parented using the parent column here to that first shape. Come down to its scale, tap S to bring up the scale, or twirl to it if you like, and set a keyframe, click on the little stopwatch, and we're going to go from 0, and I'm going to go 10 frames forward and bring that up to 100%. This is kind of a linear type of vibe as this is showing up. That's not going to be helpful to me too much, so I'm going to ease those by hitting F9, come into the graph editor, and we're going to give this handle a pull like that. So it's showing up like that. You might pinch the handles a little bit more, or maybe you go for something even more extreme, pew, like that. Again, manipulate this to your heart's content, but let's move on to the highlighting phase. In order to do that, we need to make sure that we are looking at the correct space of this. So the website, which I will now make yellow so we can see it a little bit better, needs to scroll to the relevant section. So this pops in, and now let's say right about here, I'm going to call it the position of this, keyframe that, move ahead as much as it takes, and let's scrub down to here. The part that we're interested in is about copy a set of keyframes in the timeline. Yes, let's go to that section. So let's move it like so. We might even want to bring up our proportional grid just so we can kind of tell where that is. Try to line it up a little bit with the center, somewhere around there. And again, we are going to take those keyframes, we're going to ease them, hitting F9, or you can right-click Keyframe Assistant. Easy ease, your keyboard shortcut may be different. We are now going to come into the graph editor, and again, we're just going to give this handle a tweak. We're going to enter the speed graph for this one, so you can see how it looks in there. When we give that a pull, so we are whoosh, kind of like that. You really want a bit of a slow, easy start and an easy finish, so we pull those influence handles together to achieve that type of look. We've got the quote showing up. That's looking good. We now want to pop that forward. And in order to do that, I would recommend we pre-compose this object. So let's select all of these layers, Command-Shift-C, and let's call this content to highlight. Call it whatever you like. This is what I'm going to call it because we're just teaching the thing. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And now all of those things are kind of grouped together. So if we were to come in here and say, make a new solid, make it the comp size, we can now put that nicely behind. Maybe we drop like a ramp on here. So now we've got a bit of a background happening. I'm going to swap the colors and make this one, just a little bit something like that. So now we have a kind of background that this shows up over. So that's pretty nice. I'm going to scrub down. Good. I think we're looking great. The next bit of business is to select the specific area that we want to highlight. And we can do this by simply duplicating this layer, grabbing our rectangle tool, and we're going to mask out the place that we are interested in. So if we solo this layer, you can see that that's showing only this space. Now maybe we just kind of pinch this in, get this looking nice and correct. There we go. That's pretty good. We are now going to manipulate this layer independent of the others. So we can move it around. I would recommend taking its anchor point and positioning it in the middle center. Something you can do by holding down Command, double-clicking on the Pan Behind tool. It'll snap that right into the middle center like that. And you can see that because these two layers are the same, as we pause down here, it doesn't really matter where this is or what's going on. As long as these two are kind of aligned over each other, it's going to seem like nothing weird is going on. You might want to trim this layer like so, but I recommend leaving them both long so that you can keep them over top of each other in time. Option and right and left square brackets will be your trimming functions. Now we want this to pop forward, so call up the P for position, S for scale, set keyframes on those, move ahead, say 20 frames, and let's make that nice and big. There we go. Let's get nice and big. Maybe you want to move it over like this. Let's go ahead and say center this. So we can grab our align, middle, center, make that nice and large, kind of like that. And you notice it's not looking particularly good. So you might need to hit the collapse transformation button. You can see how much cleaner that gets as we bring the fidelity of this pre-comp forward. In fact, let's collapse both their transformations. Why not? Let's get crazy. The other thing we want to do is, as this is moving forward, we want what's behind it to be receding into the background. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. I'm going to place that between these two layers. Adjustment layers, if you put effects on them, will only change what's under them. It's like a very special type of lens that can make things darker. So I'm going to get the brightness and contrast effect, put that onto this adjustment layer. And I like to use the adjustment layer because this is going to adjust everything under it. That means whatever this background is, whatever this layer is, we could be applying the effects just to that original content layer. But personally, I like to darken everything or do whatever we're doing to everything. All right, you'll see what I mean in a minute. So the brightness, I'm going to just crank the brightness down, and the contrast, I'm going to crank that down as well. So everything under here is getting less bright, less contrasty. And you might want to say use legacy version. So let's go ahead and try to do something a little bit like this. So getting much, much darker and less contrasty, we end up with this. So we can really tell that this is what we want to be showing. I am going to keyframe this to be showing up. You can do this in a few ways. You could keyframe the opacity of this adjustment layer so that it goes from 0 up to 100 as this is moving. Perfectly good thing to do. Or you might keyframe these individual properties as they are going. Another thing you might do is apply maybe a blur onto here. So we'll go ahead and get the Gauss in the house, Gaussian blur onto here. And so if we crank up a little bit of that, you can see that things in the background are getting a little blurry. I like to use the Gauss blur because it repeats the edge pixels with that turned on. And you'll notice that if we use the opacity, things are a little bit gauzy in the in-between phase. So if that's something you're into, go ahead. Otherwise, you want to be keyframing these properties themselves as we slide from one thing to the other. Something to think about. Again, we are going to be easing these so that we can enjoy a nice smooth transition between the two. And now we want to highlight this. Now, there's a few ways we could do that. I like to do that inside of this element itself. So what we're going to be doing is choosing what we're going to highlight in here. I'm going to grab the pen tool and I'm just going to click. You see it's got a star, so we are going to be dropping down a shape. And let's highlight this. So copy a set of keyframes in the timeline, blah, 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 like that. Okay, and now let's click off, click back onto it, and then we are going to click and click, holding down Shift to make sure that we get a nice line. I'm going to increase the thickness of that. And I want to make sure that I'm increasing everybody's thickness. So we get something like this. Let's choose a different color. Let's highlight this in a nice yellow, like so. Maybe a little bit closer to red. There we go. And we want this to stick over top of everything. So let's go ahead and parent this to everything so that it's going to be behaving exactly the same. And in fact, if we call up our keyframes, because this thing has positional changes, let's have the highlighter parented to that. So if this ever slides again, this will be stuck on that page. And let's go ahead and make sure that it is referencing the same matte layer as everything else, just to keep things nice and consistent. Slide it onto the website bar. We're good to go. One thing we are not happy with yet is that the mode is incorrect. So we're going to change that highlighter mode down to something like multiply. So now the darkness of the things underneath it is showing up. You might be setting this to add if these are light letters over top of bright things. I'll just show you really quick what that might look like. So I might say have an inverse relationship with things. So you can see how that is making the text into yellow text. And maybe instead you want the highlighter to be set to an add or a lighten or a screen or something. It depends on what you want to come through. In this case, light background, dark text. Let's set this highlighter to multiply. Okay, big thumbs up for that. Let's animate this showing up. We want to get the timing right so that this has popped forward and then it's going to animate on. So I'm going to double click on this. So now we know the time is lining up between the two because our playhead remembers when we are. And then we're going to come into the highlighter. We are going to twirl down. We're going to add into this a trim paths. I call this my old friend Trimothy Paths. And I'm going to go trim multiple shapes individually. And then we are simply going to keyframe this showing up. You might need to change the order of these so that one happens and then the other happens. And I like to just make sure that each line is sort of getting trimmed at different times. So let's go ahead and trim from, in this case, say 84 forward like that. And we'll just move back a little bit. And we're going to go copy this, paste it, move back a bit, and we'll bring this all the way back to 0. And now if we ease those, you can see that shows up and then that shows up. That way it's like we're taking 2 pen strokes to go ahead and highlight all of that stuff. So let's go back to the whole block quote and let's see how we've done. So we're scrubbing down. Oh, you see the highlighting is starting and then the highlighting finishes. You can play with your keyframes in here and adjust them, move them to when you need, when feels right, how much time do we need to compress and save and make this kind of work. But now you've got this showing up, it's highlighting, we are having a good read of the quote. And if you want to put it away, well, we're just going to copy these. We're going to do exactly what it says. Command Shift. We're going to copy it and Command C, Command Shift V, paste them in reverse order. Everything goes back down. This is a bit of a meta textual thing where we're using the function that is described in the quote that we're looking at. That's a great way to now return to where we were. And now maybe we want to scrub to a different time. So let's go into that block quote itself. And we're going to copy and paste our positional key. And then let's just scrub on down to somewhere else. Maybe we go even further and you can see that because we have that matte layer referenced by our highlighter, it's going under the bar. It's working exactly as we would like. So we can scroll to a different part, highlight a different section, pull that forward, keep enjoying all of this stuff. So I hope that this is pretty helpful in highlighting a bunch of quotes or passages from articles, archival pieces. Just run you through the whole thing from start to finish, just in case you're coming in late to this. The first thing that you want to do is make sure that whatever source you're using is nice and big, be it a scan of an article, screenshots of a website. This has been pieced together from many screenshots of a website put together in Photoshop. However you end up doing it, just make sure that it is big enough that when we zoom in on it, it is still clear. If you want to do exactly as I did, you can always download these files. Links available in the description, so you can enjoy getting those, get your hands on that. And once you have your piece brought in, the first thing that we did was we made sure to bring in a shape layer. We rounded that off, and that became our matte. So that's the visible area. This might be true of any piece that you're bringing in. So that serves as the visible area of the layer. We are then basically scrolling or sliding that source piece underneath of that, and that is allowing us to zoom in on the section we're interested in. This is also where we do our highlighting. The highlighting itself is done with a shape layer. Let's call it the highlighter here. It's a shape layer that is just a trim paths applied to a couple of paths. The paths are a nice bright color. That's set to multiply because we have a bright background and dark text. So that's going to highlight it nicely there. And in order to differentiate our quote from the background, we've got this adjustment layer that's hanging out in between the highlighted quote and everything else. And this is just using brightness and contrast and a Gauss in the house blur to make things darker and blurrier. We're using opacity in this case to bring this on and off, but you might be choosing to just keyframe these values in here. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope you are going to be quoting a bunch of stuff and you can quote me on that. If you make things out of this, we want to see it. Share it with us at Adobe Live so that we can enjoy seeing the stuff that you're making. We want to see that. You can share it with me personally if you want. I'm at EC Abrams on the internet. So if you have After Effects questions, get at me anytime. I'm on all the social medias as at EC Abrams. But hang out here on Adobe Live for more excellent things going on during the day. So make sure you subscribe to us on all the social channels. We're on YouTube. I think we're on Instagram. You can probably find us on LinkedIn. We're all over the place. So lots of long form and short form stuff, live shows, great tips and tricks and everything that you want to know. So make sure you subscribe and like our stuff and ask us questions. We want to help out. We want to get you doing what you want to do with the software. So make sure you do that. All right, that's enough out of me. I'm Evan Abrams for Adobe Live. Stay creative, be kind to each other, and I'll see you all around the internet. Bye for now.